right, we're back. We're doing a pre-record before Thanksgiving. We're coming fresh off our live stream, and we had so many questions asked that we didn't have enough time to answer everything. So we're going to go through some of the favorite questions we had that we weren't able to get to on the live stream last week.
Yep.
So I think I broke them down into the themes of the podcast. So art, science, technology, and then miscellaneous. And I guess we'll start with the one of the miscellaneous is miscellanea. Do you think art, science, and tech are starting to blend too much or not enough?
That's an interesting question. I think my hunch is just about right in the sense of, I think that this question is a little bit deeper than most people would even think to ask, but that's what Rate was meant to do, is to have people think about this, not necessarily separating the three of them or making them all one, but there is a through line between all of them that people should consider more often. But I think there's a good enough balance. If you're in the circle, you're in the circle, right? So you delineate them, and if you're not, then okay, that's fine too.
And I think that's, like you said, that's the point. And the whole thing is like everybody's creating something. Science, you're typically creating knowledge, or you're creating expression. Technology, I've carved out to mean like people who actually make the stuff. Like so many people work in tech who don't ever work with like code or work on infrastructure or work on like actual product design. It's just I don't know what they do. But in the skills that you need to be successful in all three of them, I think are very similar. And I think there's a lot of blend. The best scientists, the best artists, the best technologists are always kind of foot dabbling in other. You might not be into science, but you might be really into doing art. Like I think photography and engineering go pretty much hand in hand. Like everyone I know who does like some sort of coding has dabbled in photography or music or at one point.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Pretty much. I would say very rarely I don't find people who do. It's not unheard of, but like everybody I've worked with personally is always, or they get into some kind of like really obscure like.
Maybe you just know very interesting people.
I could. Board games is another big one, and not like the board games that a lot of people are probably familiar with, like really like hard, obscure kind of niche. That
we were just talking about that earlier. There are dark corners of very much everything out there that we don't even know exist. Yeah.
But yeah, I would say it's probably good. And like everything else, I think if you sample, you're going to find imbalance.
Yeah, it's as you were talking, I started to think there's a little bit of both. I'm talking science and art, right? This is an age-old question. A lot of people thought science versus art and stuff like that. But there's very much a little bit of each in the other. So like the science and art might be like a process that someone goes through when they're trying to create art. And there's an art to doing science or doing any type of engineering. You got to know what to balance in terms of when to take risks and when not to. So there's a little bit of each in both. Yeah. It's more of a mixture, I would say. So I wouldn't say that there's too much of one and the other. Maybe that's when you deviate from getting it just right, or if you go too much towards one, you are omitting something that could make you more successful in your intention, I guess. Is what I'm trying to say. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We touched on this a little bit in the live stream, but I liked it. Do you think AI generated art has soul, or is it just noise dressed up pretty?
I need to know how you define soul. I think that's where it starts.
Yeah. I guess I take that as, or I guess maybe I read that as, I think I defined on the live, I define art typically as like human expression manifest. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a human expressing human, but we don't really have any, I don't think I have any examples of it not being that. But when it comes to the case of AI, like I do think AI at some point may be capable of doing art, maybe better than people. I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. So I would say at this point, it would say it's noise dressed up. It doesn't, I don't want to detract from the capabilities. Like Google just put out a new image editing model. That's pretty damn good. It's getting better and better every year. It's leaps and bounds better. So when it comes to like originality and creativity, no, these things are still not anywhere close to being creative. They might expose you to things you haven't thought about or didn't know about, but they're not creative yet, if ever. But yeah, the I think art is also very
Yeah.
interpretive, and it really is the eye of the beholder to some extent to say if something's art or not. And so there might be a lot of people out there now or even in the future who say, yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Everybody I know at least has basically said it sucks. So take it for what it's
Yeah,
worth.
I go back to what I mentioned in the live stream as well. If you try and be objective, and I'm not saying this is the way you should think about it, but I'm offering a perspective here. If you try to be objective and you don't know where the source of whatever the thing came from, would you say it was X, Y, or Z? So in a scenario, it's if you look at something like a piece of art, would you say that art has soul without even knowing where it came? And then internally, if you find out that it did come from a machine and now you're hedging towards it doesn't have a soul, maybe that's something you need to explore for yourself. I can't tell you whether it is or
Yeah.
not, but I've held the strong belief that that should be how you should start to think about these types of things is if you don't know where it came from, just looking at it for what it is, how would you feel? How would you react to it? And then once you know the source, does that change things? Of course, it's going to change things, but maybe you need to explore that, why it changes things for you.
Yeah, I agree. Do you ever feel like scientific thinkers get misrepresented? Yes.
Misrepresented how, I think.
I think, and may I'll expand. So yes, and I think it a lot of times comes down to things are either overhyped
Yeah.
just in general, like AI science is a big one on that. A lot of stuff I see coming out in biology is also pretty overhyped. Whereas it's maybe a very revolutionary advancement in the field, which is really exciting, but then that excitement gets misconstrued for some sort of magic breakthrough that isn't ready. Like CRISPR was, the one of the more recent ones that I'm sure everyone's probably heard about by now. Fantastic technology opened up all sorts of opportunities, but it was sold as this like
Mhm.
magic gene editing technology that you can just go in and pinpoint things and it just works and we can now do anything we want in DNA. And it's like technically also way more complicated than not. And I think a lot of people came away with the impression that it does far more than
Mm.
it does that it can do, or it's much more. It's provided more capabilities than we actually
Yeah.
have. And I think that then continues to erode science trust. It's I've used this example before too, but it's drinking a glass of wine is good one year and
Yeah.
bad the next year, and then all alcohol is bad, and then someone does a study and they find that sometimes alcohol is good, and like it it's all probably true because I've read the studies, and it's if you're isolating for a specific thing, then yes, that the evidence suggests that. In general, should you drink alcohol? I think that's a hand wavy question. It seems to be the evidence is pretty much conclusively like it is detrimental, and it's very questionable if the benefits of it outweigh the detriment.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. That was actually where I was going to head with this. More objectively, it's the misrepresentation of scientific thinkers is that there's an assumption that they're correct. And if you look at different studies where there is contention in the scientific domain, you'll find that you can find evidence on both sides of an argument. So one side may use, oh, it's been backed by quote unquote science, or a scientific thinker from one position may present themselves, and then you also have someone on the opposite present themselves as a scientific thinker. And once you bring in the idea of, oh, backed by science, all of a sudden it feels like it's right, even though the science is mixed or it's not being interpreted correctly. So that there is a bias towards believing that science is right. But I think the key point here is knowing, quote unquote, how the science was done. Um, so the misrepresentation here is science is right, but not always from the perspective of depends on what the science is.
Science is like all things that are hard for humans to comprehend. Like over time, science is always right. In the moment, it might not be correct because we either don't know something or haven't discovered it yet. And so as long as you're doing the scientific method and you're not trying to misrepresent it, you will that is the proven pathway to advance knowledge and learn more and make things happen. There's other ways to do it. You can get lucky. Like a lot of people will just make it's like going to a casino and throwing all your money down on red on a
Just
roulette
hits.
table. Like 50%
Yeah.
of the time you're going
Yeah.
to be right, but you could be wrong 5 times in a
Yeah.
row. You could be wrong 10 times in a row. Random chance says that over time, you do this enough, you'll get a 50-50 distribution. It's a really easy way to understand that. Same with science. Like the alcohol thing is a great example of, in certain instances, yeah, drinking can help, especially if the water, like that's why humans are here. We developed beer and wine to,
So we didn't have
in
to drink
most
water.
part,
Yeah. Yeah.
combat
Yeah.
dirty water. You can also just not defecate in your water source and remove a lot of those problems.
Yeah. Makes me wonder if this person who was asking the
Which
question is from a scientific background or not.
I know we need to have a better way to ask anonymous questions too, because I like if people want credit, I want to be able to give them credit for a good question, but I do think that I did get some like people that I know closely and also friends after the live stream, and I've watched it post. Did have some stuff. They were like, "Oh, you should have talked about this," and I was like, "Why don't you bring that up as a question?" They're like, "Oh, I can't bring that up as a question because of my field or
Oh, interesting.
because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
of who I work
Right.
for or
Right.
something like that."
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think for maybe the next one we do, I'm going to try to find a technology or something where people can submit anonymous questions or use the YouTube chat. The YouTube chat works fine. It's just, again, if you don't want it tied back to you for some reason. And anonymity is sometimes bad, but when it comes to stuff like this, I'm totally cool with it because like we filter it. And if it's a crazy thing, we won't talk about it. I talk about enough crazy
Yeah.
things.
You got us covered for that.
There's only room for one crazy person. What makes a piece of art timeless, in your opinion?
Oh, this is a very good question.
That's an
Yeah,
awesome
my
question.
hunch is, my hunch, I don't know about the timeless piece, but my hunch initially was I think it has to, in some way, relate to the human condition, but that may not be true in the future.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah. I think it has to creatively express some sort of universal understanding.
Hmm,
And so the human condition is oftentimes a universal understanding. Like you poll 10 humans about something and you probably get roughly the same answer. It might be said differently and there's cultural differences and stuff. But if you ask the question in the right way, you get tapped in. That's like a sociology kind of psychological thing.
oh, interesting.
And there, I mean, there's like the Fibonacci sequence of numbers is represented a lot in
Yeah,
nature
the
for
golden
some
ratio as
reason.
well. Yeah,
And
yeah,
a lot of people like argue that there's some kind
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah, yeah.
intelligent design or God or something like that. I don't know. Frankly, I don't really care. But the fact that we've observed that pattern pervasive through everything would suggest that we recognize that on probably some level that you like. Remember reading a study. Oh shoot, this was a while ago. This was years ago, where the title was like, "We've cracked beauty."
Okay. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And what they basically did is they looked at all portrayals of beauty in people and also objects, like things that society is considered beautiful, and ran a bunch of math and image. I think there's probably AI in there too. They use image recognition. And they basically found that it's just a set of ratios. It's effectively the golden ratio is
Yeah,
a little bit different than the golden ratio, but it was effectively like they mathed it out and it was always within a certain variance of this magic ratio that they discovered. And so there is beauty is in the eye of the beholder, except for most people will recognize most things that
yeah, yeah,
way, right? And yes, you can get into all sorts of sociological and cultural differences of these things. We can unlearn those patterns, but there is something that is like inherent within nature, and we're all creatures of nature, that is internalized. And I think the timeless art is things that can tap into that without being expressive within a certain
yeah,
style. A lot of the art that you see is culturally driven for something in vogue, is even a phrase that is coined to make the point, that tends to fall out of flavor or will be appreciated as a vintage piece. But when you have the people who will say that, yeah, this is a timeless representation, it's almost always, if you can look past the style, it's almost always because it's some sort of universal expression that people have tapped
yeah.
into.
I like
I
the way you
think.
framed that. I think it's like the question is there like the effective equivalent of the golden ratio for a lot of people in terms of what art is? Um, it's interesting to know if our evolutionary history has given us that bias towards that golden ratio. So when you talk about timeless in the future,
Yeah.
as we evolve, we'll see as we evolve as beings, if that slowly gets weeded out or slowly gets more ingrained towards something where you can actually say that there's
Yeah.
this common theme that most people or most things will find art.
There's a lot of sociology that, human preferences, culture, there's a lot of variations, but if you look at it like through an abstraction, it's really not that different,
Isn't that the
right?
definition of
Every human
is
culture
that the
has,
definition of abstraction?
yeah, but no, I'll give you some example. But like every human culture has some sort of intoxicant
Okay.
that
Yeah,
they
yeah. Okay.
gravitate towards, like
Sure.
alcohol,
Sure.
caffeine, opium, like all throughout history, right? I'm not endorsing any of this stuff, but there's almost always something like, or something rare that's hard to find, that's seasonal or is hard to get or doesn't come around very often. If that's an animal, a plant, a flower, we've then evolved cultural traditions to refine those things to making holiday baking is
Mhm.
a great example where we do this. Every culture has some sort of a
Cultural, yeah,
festival or
yeah,
some
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
a
yeah.
tradition. It almost always has some sort of food, almost always has some sort of musical element, dance, that sort of thing. And yeah, they're different dances, it's different language, it's different sounds, it's different food, it's different flavors. But like those three things are almost completely universal across every
Yeah.
human culture.
Food is time. Food
So
is timeless
I
art.
don't know. Yeah. And so I don't, people get way too wrapped up in the like why about that. And I think that's something we need to focus more on is, yeah, maybe your food isn't what I like all the time or even like at all, but it's something that is meaningful to you and we can easily exchange it. And we need to be focusing more on like the abstractions that we have in common versus like the details of the
Yeah, yeah,
abstractions. And our society is so goddamn focused on all these minutia ideas and details that really don't matter, but the algorithm loves because then it can pit people
sure.
against
Yeah,
each
it
other.
gives you the extremes. Yeah,
Yeah. So there's a lot more questions, but I think in the interest of time and also the holiday that a lot of people will be celebrating is the Thanksgiving weekend in the United States. So a lot of people are
yep.
off and just get an excuse to celebrate, even if you don't celebrate Thanksgiving. The last question, I think it's a two-parter, but do you ever feel the burnout that comes from constantly adapting to change in your field? And then how do you reset when that
We've talked a little
happens?
bit about before, right? Like I know you like to go out in nature. You
Yeah.
like to do stuff. We talked a little about digital detoxes. Personally, I've talked
Mhm.
about weirdly enough working more, but on different things. So
Yeah. That's entrepreneurism though, right? Like I do this, like, I'm not gonna work. And then I'll be working. And my partner will be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, working? Different though. It's totally different. You don't understand.
in terms of the burnout, I think every person experiences burnout a little bit differently. With respect to burning out because of rapid changes in the field, I have not felt that personally, but I do like to bounce between things. So like anytime something is moving quick, my attention is focused elsewhere, and I come back and things are different. I'm like, oh, things have changed. Okay, that makes sense because I was focused on this other thing. So I have this weird natural barrier of feeling like I'm not keeping up
Yeah.
because I personally know that I've left it for a little bit. So when I come back, of course things are going to be different.
Yeah. Yeah. I borrow a joke from the Hulk, but I feel like I'm
Yeah.
just always burned out.
That's a good one too.
Right. One of the jokes in the Marvel series with the Incredible Hulk is later on in the comic. I think it made it into one of the Avengers movies too. But they're like, "What's your
Yeah, yeah.
secret for being?" Because the
Yeah, how are
I
you
think it
going
was
to get
Bruce
angry or
Banner
something like that?
couldn't
Yeah, yeah.
become couldn't
Unless
become the
he's
Hulk
angry.
unless
Yeah, yeah.
something bad happened or traumatic, and then he was able
That's
to
yeah.
turn on, and it was like, "I'm always angry." But yeah, I don't think I'm always burned out, but I do get change fatigued a lot, and I get really annoyed by like the industry, like product people specifically, because there is a drive to just change. And like, there's a difference between changing to innovate and
Yeah,
changing. And I see much more of the latter where it's like we are going to redo the UI in an operating system
yeah, yeah.
that
Yeah.
people use on their phones because we want to. Okay, is did they do a bunch of stuff under the hood that maybe made it easier to design stuff? I don't know, maybe, but it's like that is such a massive change for folks. And when my job is to use your operating system to do work and now everything looks a little bit off, I'm a very visual person. It like destroyed me for 2 weeks. And there's a lot of times that bad design will get greenlit. Like I am all for making things better, more efficient, and that does upset folks and that is change and you just have to deal with it. But I feel like it's really lazy and a lot of people are, they're just, it's really easy to show this box moved over here and we changed and look how much value we drove when you're just measuring the
Yeah,
wrong
yeah.
thing.
I mean, I will say we both
I
talk a lot about burnout. I do want to emphasize that if we don't experience, that doesn't mean it's not something serious, right?
Oh, 100%. A lot of
Yeah,
people
yeah.
do. Yeah. But so I get annoyed by it. So I don't know if I don't really get burned out from change, but I get annoyed by it when it's unnecessary or it's not clear why it's done. But I would say generally, like, I don't have
Mm.
pattern. Maybe it's just my natural state is just like anarchy. So like, I just like, whatever, everything is changing all the
Right. Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. It's one it's sort of
So
weirdly
I'm just kind of like, whatever,
exactly.
it's
Yeah, it's just sort of
different
weirdly
now,
my
right?
perspective on it too is I understand that everything is changing all the time. And that's one of the things I've noticed with a lot of my friends that I talk to who do feel like they're burned out or express that they're burned out. A lot of times it's usually because they feel like they're behind on something or they're not where they want to
Yeah.
be. So it's like this idea of you're trying to chase something, but there are so many things out there that you're never really going to catch whatever it is that you're looking for, I don't think. So it's like there's a constant
Yeah.
progression. Things are always moving, things are always changing. So it's like trying to understand how your relationship is with that idea that maybe affects how your relationship with burnout
Yeah.
is.
And I think a lot of it's
Yeah,
self-imposed.
exactly. Yeah.
Like you just said, like I do. I think you just need to accept that change is constant, right? It's like the phrase is the phrase. And I definitely have things that I like that I don't like to change, but it's like if stuff changes or it's I don't know, I don't really have an attachment to a lot of stuff like that I think that's another piece is you have to choose where to put your mental energy in 2025 and you really need to be focusing on the things you can actually control. And one of the core things that I you can control that I see oftentimes folks don't is like how you
Mm,
react to stuff and what
mm.
makes you react. Like you're mad.
Why?
Okay,
Yeah.
why are you mad? Ask the question. Why are you this isn't therapy, but I think they go through this stuff in therapy, but it's like why
Yeah.
are you mad? Did the person pulling out of the parking spot a little bit faster than you wanted them to really impact your life? Maybe, but is it really worth investing the mental energy into being mad about it? No. I see the same thing with change. It's like, yeah, my OS changed. Okay, I guess I have to learn some new stuff. It's going to set me back a
Yeah.
little bit, but whatever. And then it's fine. But when it changes again the next week. But I do like the tinting. If people aren't following iOS, Apple changed their UI. I actually think it's that bad, but they did enough like tweaky stuff with
Yeah.
icons and layouts and stuff. It did actually throw me for a couple weeks. They have a new feature that I should PSA for everyone that you can add tinting to either light mode or dark mode that
Like the
helps
blue.
anything that's transparent. It gives it contrast and I find it much more visual appealing and way easier to work
Interesting.
with. And if you want your like best to look great and shiny, it's probably fine the way it is if you use it for work or don't. I like beautiful things, but my OS doesn't necessarily need to be one of them. It needs to
Yeah.
be functional, like purely because I work with it. It helps. And it's under displays, I think.
Oh,
I
interesting.
forget what the liquid glass. So it's like displays, liquid glass, and there should be like a tinting option on iOS and Mac OS
Wait,
in
so
the
you're saying
latest
turn
version.
tinting on or off? Okay. Okay.
Turn it on. Yeah. And try it's instant. One of the things they actually did do to improve with all this UI stuff is they made all these UI
That's
changes
cool. Yeah,
instantaneous.
yeah.
So you
And
like
you
click the
instantly see it.
button,
Yeah.
the screen kind of flashes and it all changes. So if you don't like it, you just go back and
That's
flip it
cool.
off real quick. You just have to like
Yeah.
restart. So,
Cool.
change is
Yeah.
good.
Change is
It
good.
gets
Some change is
better.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for the holiday week
No,
for folks?
these were great questions. I think one of the things that we
Yeah.
both talked about after the live stream was we hoped to be able to engage with people more, right? I think we'll be looking into ways of doing that. Like these questions, us talking to them, having people
Yeah.
express their opinions on them helps us think about it as well. So it's cool to see that happen.
Yeah. I love the live stream
Yeah.
questions, and I would encourage everybody. We're going to do another one in December. We haven't got
Mm.
the date yet, but stay tuned. Ask questions, even if you think you're stupid.
Yeah.
Ask them because I think we'll try to get to them as we can. It's so much more fun to do the podcast. I love doing it. That's why we do it. but it's so much more fun to have people like actively engaged or asking questions or like hitting points that we might not have thought of, or hitting points that we thought of. And we're like, I don't, there's all sorts of ideas and stuff I want to talk about. And sometimes I just won't mention things. But then if I know people are actually interested in that angle or have a perspective going through it.
Awesome.
All right. Happy whatever day it is when you're watching.
Happy holidays if it is the holidays. For us it is.
You can find us
I
at
know, right?
create.com.
It's the end of the
It's like
year.
the word
It's holidays
create
everywhere.
with a 3
All right, take care,
instead of
everybody.
the C.
All right. Take care.
As always, we encourage you to listen, watch, do. We'll see you next time.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/38 or at ko-fi.com/38.
Thanks for listening.